Baby saw a bear cub stuck in an insurance office filing cabinet. What Baby did next? Covered hearts. The rain hadn't stopped since morning, and Jessica Brooks held her 8-month-old daughter Lily closer as they stepped into the old insurance office on Maple Street. The building smelled like old paper and coffee that had been sitting too long, mixed with something else Jessica couldn't quite place. It was sweet, almost like honey, but fainter, like a memory of sweetness rather than the real thing. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, creating a steady rhythm that matched the rain drumming against the windows. Jessica needed to drop off some documents, a simple task that should have taken 5 minutes at most, but the receptionist had stepped away, leaving a small note that said she'd return shortly. So Jessica waited, bouncing Lily gently on her hip while the baby's bright eyes took in everything around them with that special kind of wonder only babies possess. The office felt frozen in time, as if it had been waiting for something to happen for years and years. The walls were covered in faded motivational posters, their edges curling like autumn leaves, and the carpet beneath their feet was a pattern of blues and grays that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at it. Lily started making soft cooing sounds, her tiny hands reaching out toward something Jessica couldn't see at first. Babies always seem to notice things adults missed, those little details that existed in the spaces between what we thought was important. Jessica followed her daughter's gaze to the far corner of the waiting area, where an old wooden filing cabinet stood against the wall. It was the kind of furniture that belonged to another era, with brass handles that had turned green with age, and drawers that probably hadn't been opened in months, maybe years. Something about that cabinet made the air feel different, thicker somehow, like the moment before lightning strikes when everything holds its breath. Lily's cooing grew more insistent, and she started squirming in Jessica's arms, reaching toward the cabinet with both hands now. Her little fingers opened and closed, as if she was trying to grab something invisible floating in the air between them and that old piece of furniture. Jessica walked closer, her footsteps muffled by the worn carpet, and as they approached, she heard it. The sound was so soft at first that she thought she was imagining it, but no, there it was again. A tiny scratching noise, like fingernails on wood, but smaller, more delicate. It was coming from inside the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. The drawer was slightly open. Just a crack, really, maybe an inch at most. Jessica bent down, still holding Lily, and peered into the darkness of that small opening. The scratching sound came again, followed by something that made her heart skip. It was a whimper, soft and scared, the kind of sound that pulled at something deep inside her chest. She set Lily down on the carpet carefully, making sure the baby was stable in her sitting position, and then slowly, so slowly, pulled the drawer open wider. The old metal groaned in protest, a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet office, and what she saw inside made her forget how to breathe for a moment. There, nestled among yellowed insurance forms and forgotten carbon copies, was a bear cub. Not a teddy bear, not a toy, but an actual living, breathing bear cub no bigger than a house cat. Its fur was the color of chocolate milk, soft and fluffy in the way only baby animal fur could be, and its eyes were huge and dark, reflecting the fluorescent lights like tiny mirrors. The cub was stuck. Its back leg caught somehow in the metal framework at the back of the drawer, and every time it tried to move, it only seemed to make things worse. Jessica's mind tried to make sense of what she was seeing, but logic had apparently taken a vacation. How could a bear cub be in an insurance office filing cabinet? How long had it been there? Where was its mother? These questions swirled in her head like leaves in a storm. But they were interrupted by Lily. The baby had crawled forward while Jessica was frozen in shock, and now she was right next to the open drawer, her tiny hand reaching toward the frightened cub. Jessica's first instinct was to pull her daughter away, to protect her from potential danger, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the way the cub's eyes softened when it saw Lily, or maybe it was the gentle way her daughter moved, with no fear at all, just pure curiosity and something else. Something that looked remarkably like compassion. Lily's hand touched the cub's fur, and the most extraordinary thing happened. The cub stopped struggling immediately, its whole body relaxing as if Lily's touch had some kind of magic in it. The baby made soft sounds, not quite words, but something that seemed to mean something anyway, and the cub responded with tiny huffing noises that almost sounded like purring. Jessica watched, transfixed, as her 8-month-old daughter seemed to communicate with this impossible creature in a language that needed no words. Lily's other hand joined the first, gently stroking the cub's head, and then she did something that would stay with Jessica forever. She leaned forward and gave the cub the softest, gentlest hug, her small arms barely able to wrap around its fuzzy body. The cub nuzzled into her embrace, and for a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. There was no rain, no insurance office, no logical explanation needed. There was just this perfect, impossible moment of connection between two babies of different species. Jessica knew she had to help, had to free the cub from its trap, but she was afraid to break whatever spell had been cast. She moved slowly, carefully, her hands trembling slightly as she reached into the drawer. The metal framework at the back was old and bent, creating a gap just large enough for a small paw to slip through, but not pull back out. She could feel the cub tense as her hands got close to its trapped leg, but Lily kept stroking its head, kept making those soft, soothing sounds, and the cub stayed still. Jessica worked carefully, trying to bend the metal just enough to free the trapped paw without hurting the cub. The metal was stubborn, resisting her efforts, and she could feel sweat forming on her forehead despite the cool air of the office. Then Lily did something unexpected. She placed both of her tiny hands on the drawer itself, right where the metal framework met the wood, and pushed. It shouldn't have made any difference. An 8-month-old baby didn't have the strength to bend metal, but somehow impossibly the framework shifted. Just a little, just enough. Jessica felt it give under her fingers, and suddenly the cub's paw was free. The little creature pulled its leg back immediately, flexing it as if testing that it still worked. And then it did the most remarkable thing. Instead of running away, instead of showing any fear, it climbed into Lily's lap and curled up there like it had found the safest place in the world. Jessica sat back on her heels, watching her daughter and this mysterious cub with a mixture of awe and confusion that made her head spin. The office around them seemed different now, as if the very air had changed composition. The fluorescent lights didn't seem quite as harsh, and the rain outside sounded more like music than just weather. She noticed other things too, things that hadn't been there before, or maybe things she just hadn't seen. There were tiny paw prints in the dust on top of the filing cabinet, leading to and from the drawer as if the cub had been coming and going for who knows how long. There were small scratches on the wood near the drawer handle, marks that could have been made by tiny claws trying to open it from the outside. The cub made a sound, something between a yawn and a sigh, and Jessica saw that it was falling asleep in Lily's lap. Her daughter looked up at her with those big eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom of the universe, and Jessica understood something without words passing between them. This wasn't just a random encounter, this was something else, something that defied explanation but felt absolutely right. She reached out slowly and touched the cub's fur herself, surprised at how soft it was, like touching a cloud that had somehow become solid. The cub stirred slightly but didn't wake, just adjusted its position to be more comfortable against Lily's stomach. Time seemed to move differently in that moment, stretching like taffy, each second lasting longer than it should. Jessica found herself thinking about all the impossible things that must have aligned for this moment to happen. The receptionist being away, the drawer being slightly open, Lily noticing it, the cub being trapped but not hurt, her daughter's incredible ability to calm a wild animal with just a touch. It was like the universe had conspired to bring them all together in this unremarkable insurance office on this rainy afternoon. She thought about calling someone, animal control maybe, or the police, but something held her back. This felt too special, too fragile to involve the outside world just yet. Lily started humming, a tuneless little melody that babies make when they're happy, and the cub's breathing deepened, matching the rhythm of her song. Jessica found herself humming along, adding her voice to her daughter's, creating a strange little lullaby that filled the quiet office. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows, and the fluorescent lights hummed their electrical song, and together it all created a kind of music that felt ancient and new at the same time. She wondered if anyone would believe her if she told them about this, about finding a bear cub in a filing cabinet and watching her baby daughter befriend it like they'd known each other forever. The cub's fur rippled with each breath, and Jessica noticed markings she hadn't seen before. There were lighter patches around its ears that looked almost like stars, and a pattern on its back that resembled a constellation she couldn't quite name. These weren't normal markings for a bear, at least not any bear she'd ever seen in pictures or at the zoo. This cub was different, special in ways that went beyond just being found in an impossible place. She reached out again, this time letting her fingers trace those star-like patterns, and felt a tingling sensation, like static electricity, but warmer, more alive. Lily giggled, a sound that bubbled up from deep inside her and filled the room with joy. The cub's eyes opened at the sound, those dark mirrors reflecting not just the lights but something else, something that looked like understanding. It looked at Lily, then at Jessica, then back at Lily and made a decision. It stood up on wobbly legs, still clearly a baby despite its mysterious origins, and placed one small paw on Lily's cheek. Her daughter laughed again, louder this time, and grabbed the paw with both hands, playing with it like it was the most natural thing in the world. The cub seemed to be laughing too, in its own way, making little huffing sounds that definitely weren't threatening, just happy. Jessica heard footsteps in the hallway outside the office, probably the receptionist returning, and panic flashed through her for a moment. How would she explain this? How could she possibly make someone understand what was happening here? But before she could decide what to do, something even stranger happened. The filing cabinet began to glow, just slightly, a soft golden light that seemed to come from inside the wood itself. The light spread outward, encompassing the drawer, the cub, Lily, and finally Jessica herself. It was warm, like sunshine on a spring day, and it smelled like that honey scent she'd noticed when they first came in, but stronger now, more real. The cub stood up fully, stretching like it had just woken from a long nap, and Jessica saw that it was bigger than she'd first thought. Not huge, still definitely a baby, but larger than a house cat, more like a small dog. Its fur seemed to shimmer in the golden light, those star patterns becoming more pronounced, actually twinkling like real stars. Lily clapped her hands in delight, and the cub did a little spin, like it was showing off for her. The golden light grew brighter, not harsh or blinding, just more present, filling every corner of the office with its warm glow. Then Jessica saw something that made her question everything she thought she knew about reality. In the golden light, she could see through the walls of the office, but not to the outside world. Instead, she saw a forest, ancient and deep, with trees that reached up so high she couldn't see their tops. The forest floor was covered in soft moss and tiny flowers that glowed with their own light, and she could hear the sound of a stream somewhere nearby, water running over smooth stones. It was beautiful, more beautiful than any place she'd ever seen or imagined, and it felt like home in a way that made no logical sense. The cub walked toward the filing cabinet, which now looked less like office furniture and more like a doorway, its open drawer revealing not insurance papers but a glimpse of that impossible forest. It paused at the threshold, turning back to look at Lily with those deep, knowing eyes. Her daughter reached out toward it, not trying to stop it but saying goodbye in her own baby way, waving her tiny hand and making soft sounds that somehow conveyed love and understanding. The cub came back, just for a moment, and touched its nose to Lily's nose, a gesture so gentle and deliberate that tears sprang to Jessica's eyes. But the cub didn't leave, not yet. Instead, it did something that would change everything. It walked over to the wall where an old mirror hung, one of those institutional mirrors that every office seemed to have, slightly warped and spotted with age. The cub touched its paw to the mirror's surface, and the glass rippled like water. Images appeared in the ripples, moving pictures that told a story without words. Jessica saw the cub's mother, a magnificent bear that seemed to be made of starlight itself, searching through a forest that looked both ancient and timeless. She saw the moment the cub had wandered too far, following a butterfly that wasn't really a butterfly but something else, something that existed between worlds. She saw it find the filing cabinet, which in that other place was a hollow tree, and crawl inside to sleep, not knowing that it was crossing a boundary between worlds. The images showed more too. They showed that this wasn't the first time such a thing had happened. Throughout history, throughout all of time maybe, there had been moments when the walls between worlds grew thin, when creatures from one place could slip into another. Usually, these visitors returned quickly, finding their way back before anyone noticed. But sometimes, like now, they got stuck, trapped not just physically but between realities, needing help to find their way home. And sometimes, the images suggested, the helpers were special too, people with hearts pure enough to see past the impossible and simply offer kindness. Lily seemed to understand all of this instinctively, the way babies understand things that adults have forgotten how to see. She crawled forward again, this time toward the mirror, and placed her tiny hand next to the cub's paw. The mirror rippled again, and new images appeared. These showed Lily herself, but older, growing up with a special connection to the natural world, able to see and understand things that others couldn't. It showed her helping other creatures, other souls that had gotten lost between worlds, always with the same gentle kindness she was showing now. It was a glimpse of a future that might be, a path that was opening because of this moment, this choice to help rather than fear. The receptionist's footsteps were getting closer, and Jessica could hear her keys jingling as she approached the door. The golden light began to pulse, like a heartbeat, and the cub knew it was time. It walked back to the filing cabinet, to that impossible doorway, but before stepping through, it did one more thing. It reached up with one paw and pulled something from behind its ear, something so small Jessica almost missed it. It was a tuft of its own fur, but as it came away from the cub's body, it transformed into something else. It became a small crystal, no bigger than a pea, that glowed with the same golden light that filled the room. The cub placed the crystal in Lily's hand, closing her tiny fingers around it with its paw. Then it touched its nose to her forehead, a blessing or a thank you or maybe both, and stepped backward into the drawer. The golden light flared for just a moment, bright enough that Jessica had to close her eyes. And when she opened them again, everything was normal. The filing cabinet was just a filing cabinet, old and worn and definitely not magical. The drawer was closed, though she didn't remember closing it. The mirror on the wall showed only their reflections. A mother and baby sitting on the floor of an insurance office. Even the honey smell was gone, replaced by the familiar scent of old paper and stale coffee. But Lily still held the crystal in her hand, and when Jessica looked closer, she could see that it was real, solid and warm, and definitely not something that should exist. It pulsed with a gentle light, like a tiny heartbeat, and when she touched it, she felt that same tingling warmth she'd felt when touching the cub's fur. This was proof, evidence that what had happened was real, though she knew no one would believe her if she tried to explain it. The door to the office opened, and the receptionist walked in, apologizing for the delay and asking how she could help. Jessica stood up, scooping Lily into her arms, and handed over her documents as if nothing unusual had happened at all. As they left the office and walked back out into the rain, Jessica felt different, changed in some fundamental way. The world looked the same but felt bigger, full of more possibilities than she'd ever imagined. Lily was quiet in her arms, content, still holding that tiny crystal that no one else seemed to notice. They got into their car, and as Jessica buckled Lily into her car seat, she saw her daughter hold the crystal up to the window, where the rain was creating tiny rivers on the glass. The crystal caught the light from the street lamps, throwing tiny rainbows across the car's interior, and Lily laughed, that pure, joyful sound that only babies can make. Driving home, Jessica thought about what had happened, trying to make sense of it and failing completely. But maybe that was okay. Maybe not everything needed to make sense. Maybe sometimes the universe gave you a gift, a moment of pure magic, and all you had to do was accept it. She glanced in the rearview mirror at Lily, who was now sleeping peacefully, the crystal still clutched in her tiny fist. Her daughter had shown such courage, such immediate and unconditional love for a creature that should have been frightening. It made Jessica wonder what other wonders Lily would discover as she grew up, what other boundaries she would cross with that same fearless compassion. The rain had stopped by the time they got home, and the clouds were breaking apart to reveal stars. Jessica carried the sleeping Lily inside, careful not to wake her, and laid her in her crib. The crystal was still in her hand, glowing softly in the darkened nursery, casting gentle patterns on the walls that looked remarkably like the star patterns on the cub's fur. Jessica stood there for a long time, watching her daughter sleep, thinking about the strange and wonderful thing that had happened. She thought about the cub, hoping it had made it safely back to its mother, back to that impossible forest she'd glimpsed through the golden light. That night, Jessica dreamed of forests and stars and bears made of light. She dreamed of Lily growing up with a special gift, able to see the magic that existed in the spaces between what most people thought was real. She dreamed of other creatures finding their way to her daughter, seeking help, seeking kindness, and always finding it. When she woke the next morning, she almost convinced herself it had all been a dream. But then she saw the crystal on Lily's nightstand, still glowing with that soft, impossible light, and she knew it had been real. Days passed, then weeks, and life returned to its normal rhythm, but normal had been redefined. Jessica found herself looking at the world differently, noticing things she'd never seen before. The way birds sometimes seemed to pause outside Lily's window, looking in at her with unusual interest. The way flowers in their garden grew toward the nursery, even when the sun was in the opposite direction. The way Lily would sometimes stop whatever she was doing and stare at empty air, reaching out toward something only she could see, making those same soft communicating sounds she'd made with the cub. The crystal remained a constant presence, sometimes glowing brighter, sometimes dimmer, but always warm and always there. Jessica did some research, trying to find any reference to bears with star patterns in their fur, or crystals that glowed with their own light, but found nothing. She even went back to the insurance office once, just to look at the filing cabinet, but it was gone, replaced with a modern metal one that had no magic in it at all. The receptionist didn't remember it ever being there, insisted they'd always had the new one, though Jessica knew that wasn't true. One evening, about a month after the incident, something remarkable happened. Jessica was giving Lily a bath when the crystal, which was sitting on the bathroom counter, suddenly flared with bright golden light. Lily laughed and splashed, reaching toward it, and Jessica saw something in the light. It was quick, just a flash, but she saw the cub, healthy and happy, playing with its mother in that magical forest. The mother bear looked directly at her through the light, those same intelligent eyes the cub had inherited, and nodded once, a gesture of gratitude that transcended species and worlds. Then the light faded back to its usual soft glow, and the vision was gone. But Jessica understood the message. The cub was safe, was home, was loved. And somehow a connection remained between them, between all of them, a thread of light that stretched across impossible distances and connected their hearts. She picked up Lily from the bath, wrapping her in a soft towel, and held her close. Her daughter smelled like baby shampoo and innocence, and just a tiny bit like honey, though Jessica might have been imagining that last part. Lily grabbed the crystal from the counter, holding it up so the bathroom light shone through it, creating those rainbow patterns she loved so much. As Jessica carried Lily to her room to get her ready for bed, she thought about the future, about what other adventures might await them. If a bear cub could appear in a filing cabinet, if her 8-month-old daughter could communicate with it through pure love, if crystals could glow with their own light and show visions of other worlds, then anything was possible. The world was so much bigger and stranger and more wonderful than she'd ever imagined, and she was grateful that Lily would grow up knowing this truth from the very beginning. That night, as she tucked Lily into her crib, Jessica noticed something new. The crystal wasn't the only thing glowing. Tiny, almost invisible threads of light seemed to extend from it, reaching out through the walls of the nursery and beyond, connecting to something, many somethings, out there in the vast world. She realized that the crystal wasn't just a memento, it was a beacon, a signal to others who might need help, who might need the kind of pure, unconditional love that Lily had shown to the cub. It was both a gift and a responsibility, a promise that this wouldn't be the last magical encounter, just the first of many. Jessica kissed Lily's forehead, whispering a good night that carried all her love and wonder and acceptance of this new, expanded reality they'd discovered. Lily smiled in her sleep, her tiny hand clutching the crystal, and Jessica could have sworn she heard something in response. A distant sound like wind chimes, or maybe like a bear cub's contented sigh, carrying on the night air from very, very far away. She stood in the doorway for a moment, looking back at her remarkable daughter, and felt a deep certainty that their lives would never be ordinary again, and that was exactly as it should be. The weeks turned into months, and Lily grew, as babies do, but she grew with that crystal always nearby, and with it came subtle changes that only Jessica noticed at first. Lily never cried when animals were near. Even dogs that barked at everyone else would become calm and gentle around her. Birds would land on the windowsill of her nursery and sing songs that sounded different from their usual calls, more melodic, more purposeful. Even insects seemed drawn to her, but never in a bothersome way. Butterflies would dance around her stroller during walks, and ladybugs would land on her hands as if saying hello. Jessica started keeping a journal, documenting these small miracles. These tiny proofs that the world had shifted for them that day in the insurance office. She wrote about the morning she found Lily in her crib, wide awake and giggling, surrounded by a circle of soft golden light that faded as soon as Jessica entered the room. She wrote about the time at the park when an injured squirrel had dragged itself to Lily's blanket, and her daughter had touched it gently, and the squirrel had scampered away, no longer limping. She wrote about the dreams she sometimes had, dreams where she could see that forest again, and the mother bear watching over not just her own cub, but somehow watching over Lily too, a guardian from another world. The crystal itself seemed to be growing, though so slowly that Jessica couldn't be sure she wasn't imagining it. What had started as something the size of a pea was now more like a small marble, still perfectly clear, but with depths that seemed impossible for something so small. Sometimes, when the light hit it just right, Jessica could see things moving inside it, like looking into a snow globe filled with stars instead of snow. Lily would hold it up to her eye like a tiny telescope, babbling excitedly about whatever she saw there, though she didn't have the words yet to explain it. One day, when Lily was just over a year old and had started taking her first wobbling steps, something extraordinary happened. They were in the backyard, enjoying a warm spring afternoon, when the air suddenly filled with that familiar honey scent. Lily stood up from where she'd been playing in the grass, the crystal in her hand glowing brighter than Jessica had ever seen it. She toddled toward the back fence, where the yard met a small patch of woods, her steps surprisingly steady for such a new walker. Jessica followed, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. There, at the edge of the woods, stood a deer. Not just any deer, but one that seemed to shimmer slightly in the afternoon sun, its coat catching the light in ways that reminded Jessica of the cub's star-patterned fur. The deer was injured, a deep cut along its flank that looked painful and infected. It should have run when they approached, but instead it stood perfectly still, looking at Lily with those same knowing eyes the cub had possessed. Lily walked right up to it, no fear at all, and placed her tiny hand with the crystal against the wound. The crystal flared with light, that same golden glow that had filled the insurance office, and Jessica watched in amazement as the wound began to close. Not quickly, not like magic in movies, but slowly and naturally, as if time was moving faster just in that one spot. The infection cleared, the skin knitted together, and within minutes the deer's flank was whole and healthy, with only a faint line to show where the injury had been. The deer nuzzled Lily gently, carefully, then bounded away into the woods, pausing once to look back before disappearing among the trees. Lily turned to Jessica, her face bright with joy, and said her first real word. Not mama or dada, as Jessica had expected, but friend. Clear as day, no baby babble, just that one perfect word that explained everything. Jessica scooped her up, tears streaming down her face, understanding that this was Lily's purpose, her gift, her connection to something greater than their ordinary world. She was a bridge, a helper, a friend to creatures that needed aid in crossing between worlds or healing in this one. As Lily grew, so did her abilities and the frequency of these encounters. By the time she was 2, animals in need seemed to find their way to their yard regularly. Birds with broken wings, cats with mysterious illnesses, even once a fox with its leg caught in an old trap it had dragged for who knows how far. Each time, Lily would approach with that same fearless love, the crystal would glow, and healing would follow. But it wasn't just healing. Sometimes the animals brought things, Gifts, maybe, or messages. Feathers that shimmered with impossible colors. Stones that hummed with subtle energy. Flowers that bloomed out of season and never seemed to wilt. Jessica learned to accept it all, to stop trying to explain or understand, and just be grateful for the magic that had entered their lives. She told no one except her husband, Michael, who had been skeptical at first, but became a believer the day he watched Lily communicate with a murder of crows that had gathered in their yard, the birds responding to her babbled instructions to form patterns in the sky that looked like the constellations on the cub's fur. He started calling her his little bridge between worlds, and the name felt right, felt true. The crystal continued to grow, and by Lily's 3rd birthday, it was the size of a walnut. Still perfectly clear, but now with visible patterns inside it, swirling galaxies of light that moved and changed like living things. Lily carried it everywhere, in pockets when she had them, in her tiny hands when she didn't. Other children were drawn to her at playgrounds and parks, not understanding why, but feeling safer, happier in her presence. Adults, too, though they usually dismiss the feeling, attributing it to her sweet nature rather than something more mystical. One winter evening, when snow was falling soft and thick outside, the crystal did something new. It projected light, not just glowing but actually casting images on the wall of Lily's room. Jessica and Michael watched in wonder as the light showed them the forest again, that impossible place they'd glimpsed years ago. But now they could see more of it. Could see that it wasn't just one forest, but many, all connected, all part of some greater whole. They saw creatures moving through the trees, some familiar, some utterly alien, all living in harmony in that space between worlds. And there, in the heart of the projection, was the cub, though it wasn't really a cub anymore. It had grown into a young bear, still smaller than full-grown but magnificent, its star-patterned fur shining with its own light. It was playing with other young animals, some that belonged in that world, and some that were clearly visitors like it had once been to theirs. The bear paused in its play, looked directly at them through the projection, and Jessica could have sworn it smiled. Then it did something that made her gasp. It stood on its hind legs and placed one paw over its heart, then extended it toward them, a gesture of connection, of gratitude, of love that needed no translation. Lily, who had been almost asleep, suddenly sat up in her bed, wide awake. She held the crystal up, and her voice, clear and certain despite her young age, said, "He says, thank you. He says the door is always open. He says we're family now, all of us, forever." Then she lay back down and fell immediately asleep, as if delivering that message had been exhausting. Jessica and Michael sat in stunned silence, watching as the projection slowly faded, leaving only the soft glow of the crystal and the sound of their daughter's peaceful breathing. From that night on, things changed again. The crystal began to show them things, not constantly, but regularly. Glimpses of that other world, messages from the creatures Lily had helped, visions of connections being made between their world and others. They learned that what had happened in the insurance office wasn't unique, that all over the world, in quiet moments and ordinary places, these bridges were being built. Children like Lily, adults with open hearts, animals with special gifts, all working together to heal the divisions between worlds that had grown too wide. Jessica started to understand that the filing cabinet hadn't been random, that the insurance office wasn't just a coincidence. Insurance, after all, was about protection, about safety, about preparing for the unexpected. In a way, that's exactly what had happened. The universe had provided insurance of its own kind, ensuring that there would always be helpers, always be bridges, always be those who could see past the impossible and simply offer love. The cub had been both a test and a gift, checking to see if humanity still had that capacity for wonder and kindness, and finding it alive and well in an 8-month-old baby girl. As Lily grew older, she began to understand her gift more consciously. By 5, she could sense when a creature needed help before it arrived. By 6, she was drawing pictures of the forest world with remarkable accuracy, showing details she couldn't possibly have seen in those brief glimpses. By 7, she was teaching other children how to be kind to animals, how to see them as friends rather than others, though she was careful never to mention the more magical aspects of her experiences. She understood, with the wisdom beyond her years, that not everyone was ready to know about the bridges between worlds. The crystal had grown to the size of a small apple by then, and it no longer needed to be held to work its magic. It sat on a special shelf in Lily's room, casting its gentle light, maintaining the connection between worlds. Sometimes, late at night, Jessica would hear Lily talking to it, or through it, having conversations with friends no one else could see. She spoke of the bear often, calling him Star Brother, and from what Jessica could gather, he had become some kind of guardian or guide in that other world, helping other lost creatures find their way home. One spring day, when Lily was 8 years old, exactly 8 years after that first encounter, something remarkable happened. They received a letter, delivered not by the postal service but by a crow, that tapped on their window until Jessica opened it. The letter was written on what looked like bark but felt like silk, and the words seemed to shift between English and something else, something older, but Jessica could read it perfectly. It was an invitation, formally requesting their presence at something called a celebration of bridges, to be held at the next full moon. The location was surprising, heartbreakingly ordinary. It was the address of the old insurance office on Maple Street. Jessica drove there with Lily and Michael on the night of the full moon, half expecting to find nothing. But the building was there, looking exactly as it had 8 years ago. They walked inside, and Jessica's heart nearly stopped. The office was full of people, adults and children, all holding crystals similar to Lily's, all glowing with that familiar golden light. Some of the crystals were different colors, blue and green and silver, but all had that same inner light, that same sense of connection. But it wasn't just people. As Jessica's eyes adjusted to the golden glow that filled the room, she saw that some of the figures weren't human at all. There were animals that walked upright, shadows that had substance, beings of light that flickered between visible and not. All gathered peacefully, all connected by the light of their crystals. And there, in the corner where the filing cabinet had been, stood a doorway. Not a filing cabinet pretending to be a doorway, but an actual opening in the air, showing that forest world clear as day. Through the doorway came the bear, fully grown now, magnificent and powerful, its fur constellation bright in the golden light. It walked straight to Lily, who ran to meet it, and they embraced like old friends reuniting after a long journey. The bear spoke then, not with a voice but directly into everyone's minds, telling the story of how a baby's kindness had saved not just him, but had strengthened the bridge between worlds that had been weakening. He spoke of how Lily's act of pure love had inspired others, how the network of helpers had grown, how the worlds were healing their separation. The celebration lasted all night. Stories shared, connections renewed, new bridges planned. Jessica learned that there were thousands like them around the world, people who had encountered the impossible and chosen love over fear. She met a man from Japan whose daughter had found a phoenix chick in a vending machine, a woman from Brazil whose son had helped a river spirit trapped in a fountain, a family from Norway who had discovered a troll baby in their sauna. Each story was different, but the same. Ordinary people in ordinary places finding extraordinary moments of connection. As dawn approached, the bear gave Lily one final gift. He touched his paw to her crystal, and it transformed, becoming not larger but deeper, containing not just one connection but thousands, a network of light that connected every bridge, every helper, every act of kindness between worlds. Lily would be, he explained, a hub in this network, helping to coordinate and strengthen the connections, ensuring that no creature in need would go unhelped, no bridge would be left unmaintained. They left as the sun rose, the insurance office returning to its mundane appearance, but Jessica knew it would be there whenever they needed it. A permanent link between worlds disguised as the most ordinary of places. The drive home was quiet, each of them processing what they'd experienced, but it was a comfortable quiet, the kind that comes from sharing something profound beyond words. Lily fell asleep in the back seat, her crystal cradled in her arms, smiling as she dreamed of forests and stars and friends across impossible distances. Years passed, and Lily grew into her role as a bridge keeper, as they came to call it. She went to school like any other child, played with friends, did homework, complained about vegetables, but she also maintained the connections between worlds, helped creatures in need, and taught others about the magic that existed in ordinary moments. The crystal became a part of their home, its light a constant comfort. A reminder that the universe was vast and strange and wonderful, and that love was the most powerful force in any world. Jessica often thought back to that rainy day in the insurance office, how close she'd come to pulling Lily away from the filing cabinet, how different everything might have been if she'd given in to fear instead of trusting her daughter's instinct. She thought about all the people who must pass by magic every day, too busy or too afraid to notice, and felt grateful that she'd been given the gift of seeing. She thought about the bear, Star Brother as Lily called him, and how his moment of need had become a blessing for so many. On Lily's 18th birthday, something special happened. The crystal, which had grown to the size of a cantaloupe over the years, suddenly split. Not broke, but divided, becoming two perfect crystals, each half the size of the original, but somehow containing all of its light and power. Lily understood immediately. She kept one and gave the other to her mother, passing on the role of bridge keeper, ensuring that the work would continue even as she went off to college, to adult life, to whatever future awaited her. That night, they received another message through the crystal, not from the bear this time, but from the collective consciousness of all the bridge keepers, all the helpers, all the connections between worlds. It was simple, but profound. It said that the bridges were stable now. The worlds were in harmony, and it was all because a baby had seen a cub in need and chosen to help without hesitation. The message thanked them, all of them, for proving that love could transcend any boundary, that kindness could bridge any gap, that the impossible became possible when hearts were open. Jessica held her crystal, feeling its warmth, its connection to Lily, to the bear, to thousands of others around the world and beyond. She thought about the future, about grandchildren perhaps, about new generations of bridge keepers, about worlds yet undiscovered that might need connection. The work would continue, the magic would spread, and somewhere, in a forest that existed between worlds, a bear made of starlight watched over it all, grateful for the day he got stuck in a filing cabinet and met a baby who showed him the way home. 2 chapters of mentioned part have completed. The insurance office on Maple Street was demolished eventually, making way for a modern medical complex. But those who knew how to look could still see the doorway, still access that place between worlds. It had never been about the building, after all, but about the intention, the openness, the willingness to see beyond the ordinary. Every place could be a bridge if you knew how to look. Every moment could be magical if you knew how to see. Every creature could be a friend if you knew how to love. Lily went on to study veterinary medicine, surprising no one. But she also studied physics and philosophy, trying to understand the scientific and theoretical underpinnings of what she'd experienced all her life. She wrote papers that her professors found fascinating but unprovable about quantum entanglement between species, about consciousness as a bridge between dimensions, about love as a fundamental force like gravity or electromagnetism. Some thought her brilliant but eccentric. Others suspected she knew something they didn't. But all agreed she had a gift with animals that went beyond normal understanding. She met others like herself at university, young people who had grown up as bridge keepers, and together they formed a quiet network, not secret exactly, but discreet, helping where they could, maintaining the connections that kept the worlds in harmony. They met in ordinary places, coffee shops and libraries and park benches, their crystals hidden but always present, always glowing with that soft light that connected them to something greater. They shared stories, compared notes, planned for a future where perhaps the bridges wouldn't need to be hidden, where the magic could be acknowledged openly. Michael, Jessica's husband, became the chronicler of their experiences, writing everything down in detailed journals that he hoped might someday help others understand what had happened, what was happening, what would continue to happen as long as there were those willing to see beyond the veil. He interviewed other bridge keepers, collected their stories, created an archive of impossible encounters and miraculous connections. He called it the Honey Files, after that sweet scent that had announced the beginning of their adventure. The bear, Star Brother, appeared to them regularly over the years, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in visions through the crystal, occasionally in person when the veils were thin and the doorways were open. He had become a leader in his world, teaching others about the humans who had helped him, about the baby who had shown that love needed no common language, no shared species, no logical explanation. He brought news of other connections being made, other bridges being built, a vast network of light that spanned not just two worlds, but dozens, hundreds, perhaps infinite variations of reality, all connected by threads of compassion. One autumn evening, when Lily was 25 and home for a visit, something unexpected happened. A child appeared at their door, a little boy, no more than 5, holding a crystal that glowed with silver light instead of gold. He was lost, he said, not from their neighborhood, but from somewhere else, somewhere that he couldn't quite explain. His crystal was calling to theirs, he said, asking for help. Jessica and Lily exchanged glances, recognizing the beginning of a new chapter, a new mystery, a new opportunity to bridge worlds. The boy's name was Ethan, and his crystal, he explained in the matter-of-fact way children have, had been given to him by a whale. Not in the ocean, but in a shopping mall fountain where the whale had appeared for just a moment, long enough to ask for help finding its way home. Ethan had helped, of course, the same way Lily had helped the bear all those years ago, with simple kindness and no questions asked. Now his crystal was connecting him to others like him, and he'd been drawn to their house, to their light, to their experience. They welcomed him in, called his worried parents who had been searching everywhere, and in the hours before they arrived, they taught him what they knew. They showed him how to listen to the crystal, how to sense when creatures needed help, how to be brave in the face of the impossible. They introduced him to the network, to other bridge keepers who would help him understand his gift. And when his parents arrived, skeptical and concerned, Jessica saw in their eyes the same confusion she'd felt all those years ago, the same struggle between logic and wonder. She told them the story, the whole story, starting with a rainy day in a filing cabinet and a bear cub that shouldn't have been there. She showed them her crystal, let them feel its warmth, its reality, its undeniable truth. She watched as their skepticism melted into amazement, as they began to understand that their son had been chosen for something special, something important, something magical. By the time they left, they were believers, ready to support their son in his role as a bridge keeper, ready to see the magic that had always been there, waiting to be noticed. As the years went by, the network grew stronger, the bridges multiplied, and the worlds came closer together. Not physically, but spiritually, emotionally, connected by the countless acts of kindness that happened every day in ordinary places. Insurance offices and shopping malls, parks and parking lots, schools and hospitals, all became potential doorways, all held the possibility of magic. The crystals were everywhere now, carried by children and adults, glowing with every color imaginable, each one a story of connection, of helping, of love transcending the impossible. Lily married eventually. Another bridge keeper she met at a conference about interspecies communication that was actually a gathering of their kind. They had children, twins, who were born holding tiny crystals of their own, gifts from the universe acknowledging their heritage, their destiny as the next generation of bridge keepers. Jessica became a grandmother, watching with joy as her grandchildren played with creatures from other worlds as naturally as they played with toys, seeing no difference between the ordinary and the magical because, for them, there wasn't one. The bear, Star Brother, grew old in his world, time moving differently there but still moving forward. On his last visit, he was gray around the muzzle, moving slowly but still radiating that warm strength that had always defined him. He came to say goodbye, not sadly but peacefully, knowing that his work was done, that the bridges he'd helped create would outlast him, outlast them all. He gave one final gift, touching his paw to each of their crystals, imparting something that felt like a blessing, a protection, a promise that the connections would endure. When he passed, they felt it through the crystals, a gentle dimming of light followed by a brilliant flash as his energy rejoined the greater network, becoming part of the bridge itself rather than just a traveler upon it. They mourned him, but also celebrated him, gathering with bridge keepers from around the world to share stories of the bear who had started it all, the cub who had gotten stuck in a filing cabinet and in doing so had unstuck the worlds, allowing them to flow together again. Life continued, as it always does, ordinary and extraordinary in equal measure. Jessica grew old, watching the world change, watching the bridges become less hidden, watching humanity slowly accept that they were not alone, had never been alone, were part of something vast and interconnected and beautiful. She wrote her own book eventually, calling it The Day Everything Changed, though she knew that wasn't quite accurate. Everything had always been magical. They had just finally learned to see it. On her 80th birthday, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all carrying crystals, all connected to the network, Jessica thought back one more time to that rainy afternoon in the insurance office. She thought about how different life might have been if she'd been too afraid, too practical, too closed off to possibility. She thought about all the connections that might never have been made, all the creatures that might never have been helped, all the magic that might have remained hidden. But mostly, she thought about love. How a baby's love for a frightened cub had changed everything. How love had been the key that opened the door between worlds. How love continued to be the force that maintained the bridges, that powered the crystals, that made the impossible possible. It had never been about the magic, she realized. The magic was just the mechanism. It had always been about the love, the simple, pure willingness to help, to connect, to see others as friends rather than strangers, regardless of species or origin or logic. As the sun set on her birthday celebration, the crystals in the room began to glow brighter, all different colors creating a rainbow of light that filled the space with warmth and wonder. Through that light, Jessica could see them all the creatures they'd helped over the years, all the bridge keepers around the world, all the connections that spread out like a web of light encompassing everything. And there, in the center of it all, she saw him one more time. The bear, Star Brother, young again, running through that eternal forest, free and happy and home. He paused in his run, looked directly at her through the light, and placed his paw over his heart one more time. She mirrored the gesture, her aged hand over her own heart, and felt the connection that had started with a baby and a cub complete its circle. The light pulsed once, twice, 3 times, and then settled into its familiar gentle glow. But the connection remained, would always remain, as long as there were those willing to believe in the magic of kindness, the power of love, the possibility that in the most ordinary of places, on the most ordinary of days, something extraordinary could happen. The insurance office was gone, but filing cabinets existed everywhere. The bear was gone, but creatures in need would always find their way to those who could help. The original moment was past, but every moment held the potential for the same magic, the same connection, the same transformation. All it took was an open heart, a willing hand, and the courage to believe that impossible things were just things that hadn't been understood yet, that magic was just love made visible, that every ending was really just another beginning. Jessica closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the crystal in her hand, the love of her family around her, the connection to all the worlds beyond, and smiled. Somewhere, she knew, another child was about to discover something impossible in an ordinary place. Another creature was about to find help from an unexpected source. Another bridge was about to be built. The story would continue, had to continue, because that's what stories of love do. They spread, they grow, they transform, they connect, and they never, ever truly end. In the weeks that followed her birthday, Jessica felt a change coming. Not an ending, but a transformation, like the moment when the cub's fur had transformed into the crystal. She spent more time holding her crystal, feeling its warmth, seeing deeper into the network of light that connected all things. She could sense other bridge keepers around the world, some old like her, some young like her great-grandchildren, all part of the same great work. She could feel the pulse of the bridges themselves, the ebb and flow of creatures moving between worlds, the constant exchange of help and hope and healing. One morning, she woke to find her crystal glowing brighter than ever before, and she knew it was time. Not time to leave, but time to transform, to become something more than just a keeper of bridges. Lily was there, somehow knowing to come, and together they watched as Jessica's crystal began to merge with the network itself, becoming not just a connection point, but part of the structure that held it all together. It wasn't frightening or sad, it was beautiful, like watching a drop of water return to the ocean while somehow remaining itself. Jessica felt herself expanding, her consciousness spreading through the network, touching every crystal, every bridge keeper, every connection between worlds. She could see it all now, the full scope of what they'd built, what they'd maintained, what they'd become. It was vast beyond imagination, a living web of light that connected not just Earth to one other world, but countless worlds to each other, all held together by acts of kindness, moments of courage, choices to help rather than harm. She saw the future too, glimpses of what was coming, the bridges becoming visible to everyone, not just the chosen few. Humanity taking its place as one species among many in a vast community of consciousness. Her great-grandchildren growing up in a world where magic was normal, where helping creatures from other worlds was as common as helping a neighbor. She saw a peace, not perfect, but progressing, built on the foundation of understanding that all beings, regardless of origin, could connect through compassion. But she also remained herself, Jessica, mother and grandmother, the woman who had once stood in an insurance office and watched her baby daughter save a bear cub. She could still feel the rain from that day, still smell the honey scent, still see Lily's tiny hands reaching out fearlessly toward something that should have been impossible. That moment was eternal now, preserved in the crystal network, a reminder of how it all began, how the greatest changes could come from the smallest acts of love. Lily held her mother's hand as the transformation completed, as Jessica became both more and less than she had been, present everywhere in the network while still remaining in her own body, her own life. It was a gift, Lily understood, given to those who had served the bridges well, a way to continue the work beyond the normal limits of mortality. Jessica would age and eventually pass on physically, but part of her would always remain in the network, helping, guiding, connecting. "Can you see him?" Lily asked, knowing somehow that her mother could now see beyond even what the crystals normally showed. "Yes," Jessica whispered, tears of joy streaming down her face. "He's everywhere. Not just Star Brother, but his spirit, his love. It's woven into everything. Every bridge we cross, every connection we make, he's there. They all are, all the ones who've passed on, still part of it, still helping." They sat together in silence for a while, mother and daughter, connected by more than blood now, connected by the light that ran through all things. Finally, Lily spoke again. "The insurance office. Can you see why it happened there?" Jessica laughed, a sound full of understanding and appreciation for the universe's sense of humor. "Insurance protects what's valuable, provides security against the unexpected. That's exactly what we've been doing all these years, isn't it? Ensuring the connections remain, protecting the bridges, providing security for creatures in need. It was perfect, really. The universe choosing the most mundane metaphor for the most magical purpose." As days turned to weeks, Jessica found herself able to do things she'd never imagined. Through the network, she could comfort a frightened creature worlds away, guide a new bridge keeper through their first encounter, strengthen a connection that was weakening. She became a living part of the bridge system, her consciousness a support beam in the structure that connected all worlds. It was work, but it was also joy, pure and simple, the joy of being part of something infinitely larger than herself, while still remaining uniquely who she was. The network continued to grow, new bridge keepers emerging every day, some finding creatures in need, others being found by them. The crystals appeared in unexpected places, growing from trees, forming in streams, materializing in the hands of newborns. Each one was unique but connected, part of the same system, the same great work of connection and compassion. The world was changing, slowly but surely, becoming more open to wonder, more accepting of the impossible, more willing to see magic in the mundane. One day, a young journalist came to interview Jessica about her experience, having heard rumors of the woman who'd started it all with a baby and a bear cub. Jessica told the story again, every detail, holding nothing back. The journalist was skeptical at first, but when Jessica showed her the crystal, let her feel its warmth, showed her glimpses of the network, the skepticism melted into wonder. The article she wrote went viral, not because people believed it entirely, but because they wanted to believe it, needed to believe it, were ready to believe it. More stories emerged, people coming forward with their own impossible encounters, their own moments of connection with creatures that shouldn't exist. The scientific community was baffled but intrigued, unable to explain the crystals or the connections, but unable to deny their reality either. Philosophers debated the implications. Religious leaders sought to understand how this fit with their teachings. Children simply accepted it as they accepted all magic, naturally and without question. Through it all, Jessica remained a calm center, a grandmother who had become something more, but never forgot what she had been. She spent her days tending her garden, playing with her great-grandchildren, living a normal life that was anything but normal. Through the network, she touched millions of lives, most never knowing she existed, never knowing that their moment of wonder, their glimpse of magic, their successful connection with another world was helped along by an old woman who had once stood in an insurance office and chosen love over fear. The seasons turned, years passed, and the world continued its transformation. Governments acknowledged the bridges, creating departments to manage interworld relations. Scientists developed theories about quantum consciousness and dimensional overlap. Artists created works inspired by glimpses of other worlds. Children grew up knowing that the universe was vast and magical, and that they were part of something wonderful. The bridges were no longer hidden, no longer secret, but celebrated as humanity's gift to the cosmic community, their contribution to the great work of connection. On a spring morning, exactly 50 years after that first encounter in the insurance office, something special happened. Every crystal in the world, every single one, began to pulse in unison. Bridgekeepers everywhere felt the call, knew to gather, knew something momentous was about to occur. They came to places of power, the sites where the strongest bridges existed, and waited. Jessica, now ancient but still strong in spirit, sat in her garden with her family around her, all of them holding their crystals, all of them connected to the network. At exactly the moment when Jessica had first seen the cub all those years ago, the air shimmered and doorways opened. Not just one or two, but thousands, maybe millions, all around the world. Through them came beings from every connected world, creatures of every description, all gathering in peace, all connected by the network of light. It was a celebration, a thank you, a recognition of what had been accomplished. The bridges were complete, the connections were stable, the worlds were in harmony. Starbrother appeared one last time, not old or young but eternal, made of starlight and memory and love. He spoke to everyone simultaneously, his voice carrying through the network to every crystal, every heart, every soul. He told the story of a baby who had saved him, of a mother who had chosen trust, of a family that had changed the universe. He spoke of the countless acts of kindness that had followed, the bridges built, the connections made, the healing accomplished. He declared that the age of separation was over, that the worlds were one, that love had won. The celebration lasted for days. Beings from all worlds mingling freely, sharing stories, making friends, proving that differences were just variations on the theme of consciousness, that all beings were connected by something deeper than form or origin. Children played with creatures from distant worlds. Scientists exchanged knowledge with beings of pure energy. Artists collaborated with entities that saw in colors that didn't exist on Earth. It was chaos and harmony, difference and unity, impossible and absolutely real. When it finally ended, when the doorways closed and the beings returned to their worlds, something had fundamentally changed. The bridges remained, stronger than ever, but they were no longer needed in the same way. The worlds had learned to trust each other, to help each other, to see each other as family. The network remained. The crystals still glowed, but now they were symbols of what had been accomplished rather than tools still desperately needed. The work continued, would always continue, but it was no longer urgent, no longer critical, just a natural part of how the universe functioned. Jessica lived for several more years, watching the world she'd helped transform continue to evolve. She saw her great-grandchildren grow up in a reality where magic was normal, where helping someone from another world was as common as helping a neighbor with groceries. She saw humanity take its place in a vast community of consciousness, contributing their unique gifts of creativity and compassion. She saw peace, not perfect, but real, built on the foundation of understanding that all beings were connected, all beings deserved help, all beings were capable of love. On her final day, surrounded by family, holding her crystal one last time, Jessica felt complete. She had been part of something extraordinary, had helped build bridges that would last forever, had proven that one moment of kindness could change everything. As her consciousness fully merged with the network, becoming one with the light that connected all things, she had one final vision. She saw herself again, young and uncertain, standing in that insurance office, making the choice to trust her daughter, to trust the impossible, to trust love. And she saw that the choice was still being made, would always be made, every time someone chose kindness over fear, connection over separation, love over logic. Her last thought, as Jessica the individual dissolved into Jessica the eternal part of the network, was of gratitude. Gratitude for that rainy day, for that insurance office, for that filing cabinet, for that frightened cub, for her brave daughter, for the impossible gift of being part of something so much larger than herself. Gratitude for the proof that love was the most powerful force in any universe, that kindness could bridge any gap, that the ordinary could become extraordinary with just one choice. One moment, one act of unconditional love. The crystal in her hand dissolved into light, spreading through the network, carrying her essence to every bridge, every connection, every act of kindness that would ever be. Jessica was gone and everywhere, ended and eternal, one story complete and part of every story that would ever be told. And somewhere, in a forest between worlds, a bear made of starlight smiled, knowing that the baby who had saved him had become a force that would save countless others, forever and always, in the most ordinary places, on the most ordinary days, with the most extraordinary love.